My name is Tia Damon, and this is my place in Canadian history. Petro Maleschi was born April 2nd, 1902, to Maria and Gregory in the village of Muzelowitz, which was in the western Ukraine but occupied by Poland. Nearby, in 1903, 1 year after Petro, or Peter, Maleschi was born, Mary and Mikiata Benedega, along with their 3 children, were packing their bags and, deciding there was no future for them in their small farm in the Ukraine, left with nearly nothing to Canada, drawn by the Canadians' promise of cheap and fertile farmland. The family didn't know it, but they would eventually find themselves intertwined with the Maleschis. In late 1925, Peter Maleschi filed for his passport and traveled northwest. He was the only member of his family to want to leave the Ukraine. In Canada, the railway agreement was signed by the Canadian Pacific and Canadian National Railways, and the government allowed the railways to recruit immigrants, including from the non-preferred countries of Northern and Central Europe. More than 185,000 Central Europeans entered Canada under the agreement at this time. Ukrainian immigrants were considered Polish under the Polish occupation and were brought to Canada as such. Peter was drawn to Canada by the promise of being able to own affordable farmland and find work on the railroad, knowing it was better than suffering under Polish occupation. He aimed to go away to earn money for his family. Peter boarded a boat, the steamer Asonia, and launched off of London, England on March 4, 1926. Peter landed in Halifax March 13, 1926, along with many other Northern and Central European immigrants. He traveled for 5 days to the town of Montmartre, Saskatchewan, to meet some cousins and to work on the farm of John Cadillac, one of the men who had sponsored his immigration. He sent money home to improve the family farm that he hoped to return to. In 1929, Peter became a sectionman for the continued development of the Canadian National Railway near Montmartre. Peter missed his sister's wedding and often wrote home to his cousins about how he missed the church bells ringing from the 400-year-old church near his family home. He had a heavy heart realizing that between the turmoil at home and his lack of funds, he would never return to the Ukraine. Later, in 1944, the Russians confiscated the Maleschi property in the Ukraine and deported the family to Siberia to work in camps. Peter never saw them again, and most of their stories are lost to history as victims of World War II labor camps. Back up a little bit, and on February 17, 1934, Peter married Anne Maximetz, my great-grandmother. Anne's family had also moved to Canada from the Ukraine. They settled in Montmartre, Saskatchewan, and began their life on a very, very, very small farm plot in 1940. It was a total of 225 square feet of land. They were both founding members of the St. Peter and St. Paul Ukrainian Catholic Church, one of the first in Saskatchewan. Peter worked for the railway 38 years, a job that took him all over Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Anne's pride and joy was her award-winning flower garden, but the pair raised chicken and farm crops as well. They moved to Regina in 1959 and raised 3 children, Audrey, Ronald, and, my Guido, Harry. Harry grew up a first-generation Canadian in a small town, Saskatchewan. It was difficult to learn English and adapt to life at Canadian school after growing up in a strictly Ukrainian community for so much of his early life. Nevertheless, Harry grew up to be an intelligent and handsome young man, working for the company Sask Power. In 1964, Harry married Joan Wroblewski, my grandmother, also the descendant of Ukrainian immigrants. Her mother was Pauline Wroblewski, née Benedega, granddaughter of Mary and Mikiata Benedega. Joan and Harry stayed in Regina and had 3 daughters, Janice, Christine, and my mother, Carla. Harry and Joan made sure the girls were raised within a good home while still never forgetting their Ukrainian heritage. They grew up as members of their local Ukrainian Catholic Church, often ate the best Ukrainian pierogies and borscht, and Christine even grew up learning Ukrainian dancing. Harry worked especially hard to stay connected to his Ukrainian Canadian community. Carla grew up to be a bright and ambitious woman, and, after completing university at the University of Regina, became a federal government employee in 1989 as an administrative assistant. She later moved up as a Canadian Customs border agent. In 1996, her job took her to the Canadian and American border near the small oilfield city of Estevan, Saskatchewan. On a chance blind date a few months later, with the help of some mutual friends, she met David Ray Damon, son of Lauren and Iris Damon. Lauren had moved to Estevan after being dismissed from the Canadian military during World War II because he enlisted too young. David worked with his brothers to continue the legacy of the company Lauren had built, called Damon Trucking. Carla and Dave hit it off almost immediately, and 8 months later were married in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. 2 years later, I came along. Followed 2 years after that by my sister Sierra. Now I'm living in Canada where I can continue to explore my heritage and learn about the other unique cultures that helped build Canada. My Guido Harry has since visited the Ukraine twice and reconnected with some distant cousins, helping to piece together his family story. And my mom and grandma still continue to include pierogies and other great Ukrainian delicacies in our life. In Regina, my grandparents and other relatives worked with cultural groups like the Ukrainian Catholic Church or the Mosaic Festival to help continue spreading their unique story. As for me, well, now I'm finishing high school in Estevan and get to take what I know of my past and look forward to a future in Canada, thanks to the sacrifices of my ancestors and their ambition for a better life for their family, like me.